All right, let's get started. So how did we get here? Why are we spending part of a Tuesday night in April talking about this weird thing called personal knowledge management? I have in my adult life have had an interest for a long time in productivity. And that's just kind of the big overarching concept of how to work more efficiently, how to get stuff done, how to get important stuff done. I've read a lot of articles, blogs, YouTube videos, just all kinds of stuff, as I'm sure you have as well. But suffice it to say, productivity has been kind of something I'm wired about and enjoyed for a long time in my adult life, for a couple decades at least. Part of that is due to the way I'm wired. I'm kind of a nerdy guy, and I own that. And I enjoy looking at kind of that kind of productivity stuff. And that's just kind of in my DNA. And so it's just been a part of my life. Now, that's been kind of for the last couple of decades, I've just been on a tangent looking at it here and there. I'll read a book, I'll read an article, I'll try to implement it, but whatever, it doesn't always stick. The last 5 or 6 months, however, I've been made aware of the concept that we're going to talk about tonight, and that's personal knowledge management. And again, it was kind of just looking and exploring. And the system itself, the framework itself has been, and I don't want to overstate this, but I don't think I can, it's been revolutionary for me personally in how I manage the information that comes into me. And it changes the way I do it, but it also changes the way I've been thinking about information. And so I'm kind of excited to share that with you. I put as kind of the subtitle of the graphic I used in the original Facebook and social media post, it's nerdy until you need it. So what we're going to talk about tonight is admittedly nerdy, and welcome to the Nerd Fest. I'm glad you're here. But it's only that until you need it. And I'd like to suggest we all need it. Everybody needs to be able to have a way to not only deal with the information, but then put their finger on something that because it's useful and they want to be able to utilize that and help other people, for example. And how to do that is what PKM is all about. Let me define some terms. Let's define that first term, personal knowledge management. Some of you in your form you filled out kind of rated how much you know or don't know about productivity. There's no right answer about that. Of course, we're all over the map, and that's fine. We all have something to learn. But personal knowledge management, I'm just going to read the quote that is something that probably can keep it in your mind. PKM is a process for intentionally organizing, storing, and sharing your knowledge assets, what's important to you, your information, and that knowledge that comes from that, to improve your efficiency, your learning, and your overall life. Now, I'm not expecting you to remember that, but essentially kind of the big picture is PKM is a system that we put in place in our life. Everyone's looks different, but it's a way for us to organize, capture first of all, but then organize and share the information that comes into our life, which becomes knowledge. Some of it becomes knowledge, and then we then express that in ways that can help ourselves, but also other people. I mentioned the PKM system that you and I deal with is going to look different. I use a system that is unique to me. Now, the overarching framework is the same, but the way it's expressed is going to be different. There's many of us, I'm sure, on the call tonight that are already using certain digital apps and programs to do some of what we'll talk about. I may not use those programs. You may not use what I have on my workflow. That's not the issue. The issue is, though, how are we thinking about and how are we internalizing this information? And that'll become a little more clear as we go along. Really what PKM really kind of centers around is the concept that if you're familiar with a man named Tiago Forte, you may not know that name. Maybe you've heard his name before. He's a guru in the productivity world. And Tiago Forte, several years ago, a couple years ago at least, wrote this book. I don't know if you've ever read this book or heard of it. I don't know if it's backwards on the screen or not. It's Building a Second Brain. And essentially his concept is, and he's a big PKM guy. In fact, he kind of brought it into being. The concept of a second brain is, and I'll just read what he said, it's an external, centralized, digital repository for the things we learn and the resources from which they came. It's an external to us place that we can dump all the information that is important and relevant to us so that we can then organize that and be able to recall that in an efficient way. And obviously he wrote an entire book on how to deal with that and do that. I want to recommend that book to you. It'll be in that after call summary. I want to recommend that book, Building a Second Brain. You'll get a lot out of it, and a lot of what we talked tonight will be refreshed as you read that book. He is a guru, and he read years ago, he read the book Getting Things Done. It's another good productivity book. You might have read it yourself. And as he read that, he said there was a quote that changed his thinking of how he processes his information that comes into his life. And the quote was this. He said, when I read this quote, your mind is for having ideas, not holding them. It's a good quote. That's a really good quote. Our mind is for having ideas, thinking up ideas, dreaming about ideas, not just holding them. And so his concept is, what can we get to hold those ideas? That's where the second brain comes in, that external repository. That's where the PKM system of doing things helps us get to that place. So let's talk a little bit about what personal knowledge management does, the components of it. Some of you may know the concept of PKM. If you don't, maybe this will help kind of synthesize it. There are 4 essential points to it. The first one is to capture information. The second one is to organize information. The third one is to distill information. And the fourth one is to express information. It goes in that order, as we'll see here in a moment. If you use the word code, C-O-D-E, that's a good way to remember that. Capture information, organize information, distill information, and then express information. Let's talk about that first one. How do we capture information? Here's a question I want you to think about in your mind. How do you, right now, as of today, how do you capture a thought or an idea or a piece of information? I'm going to use an example, a telephone number, a website address. How do you capture that in a way that isn't just up here? Now, let me ask another question. Have you ever tried to keep it just up here? And about 2 days later, just up here isn't up there anymore. And you're like, I don't remember what that was. How we capture information is the very first start. And the whole concept of PKM is to leverage modern technology, modern digital technology, to capture what's most important to us. Just today at work, I was talking to someone and they mentioned something, and I thought, I need to remember that. And so I implemented, because I'm working through this, my capture workflow. And I'll show you what that is specifically here in just a second. PKM starts with systematizing how we capture relevant information. Now, little sidebar. I used to live in the Jeopardy neighborhood. What I mean by that, I wanted to know everything about everything. That was just my goal. I wanted to be, you heard the term years ago called a Renaissance man. And a Renaissance man is learned in everything, until I realized, as I've gotten older and perhaps a little bit wiser, I hope, that that's not real practical. I'm not going to be on Jeopardy. I don't have to know everything about everything. In fact, as I get older, what I'm interested in is kind of funneling a little bit. There are a few things I get really jazzed about, and most of the other stuff is kind of just, it's there. I want to suggest that as we kind of implement this system of PKM, it's going to help us ignore what maybe isn't all that interesting to us and really hone in on what is really something that entices us, that we need, for example, but that is just interesting to us. So when that happens and you hear something that is interesting, or maybe you just need to have that information, how do you capture it? Let's give this an example. I'm looking here. I think Kent Curry. Yeah, I saw Kent jump on. Now, Kent, I don't expect you to like turn your video on. You don't have to, obviously. But Kent and I used to live very close to one another back in St. Louis. This is probably, goodness, 30 years ago. I'm aging both of us by that comment. So Kent and I literally have been friends for 30 years. Is that, Kent, I saw you unmute. Does that sound right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, 30 years. In fact, it might be exactly 30 years because I think it was 1994 when we first met.
Yep. Yep, that's right. Yeah.
So if you don't know Kent Curry, you need to. He's a brilliant guy. All right. So now I thought about Kent today. I want to give you a use case of how I capture information. Let's say for kicks that today I hear someone give a quote and I think, man, that's a good quote. I want to remember that. Here is the way I capture it. Is this the only way? No. Is this the best way? Maybe not for you, but it is for me. Okay. I'm going to turn my phone on and you're going to see my, on the screen, you'll see my, my phone and the screen on my phone. All right. So here we go. If I'm at work and I hear this great quote and it is something I want to remember, this is what I do. I go to my second page. You see that big widget there that has a checkbox, the paint thing, picture icon, and then that microphone. That is Google Keep's widget. And Google Keep is my capture method of choice. It's Google's note-taking. I'm a Google guy. You'll see that quickly. It's Google's note-taking thing. And so what I do is, let's say I hear this quote. I will click on the plus sign. I'm doing that on my phone now. And you'll see it opens up a blank note. In this, I'm going to put the quote I heard today, or just this fictional quote. Okay, here it is. Let's see. Kent Curry is awesome. Okay. There we go. We didn't misspell it. All right. And I'm gonna cite this. I hear that from everyone. Okay, there's the quote. Kent Curry is awesome. I want to remember that quote. Now, I'm obviously being a bit facetious because Kent's on the call tonight. He is an awesome guy, by the way. But if that's the quote, I want to save that. All right, so I can give it a title. Maybe I'll just put Kent Curry. I'll put that as the title. Now, what I can do is I'm gonna hit the back button, and that's saved in my Google Keep. I'm setting my phone down. I'm not processing any more of that. That's just done. Okay, it's saved in my Google Keep. And that's all I need to do with it right then. Here's the big key. When we capture stuff, we're capturing it in a way that gets it out of our way as quickly as possible. Okay, we're going to go to the next step in a second, which is organizing, but that's not the same as capturing. Whatever capture method we have, it's simply to get it out of our brain into some kind of digital form. So it's there. I just put in my digital capture method, this quote I want to remember. Okay, it's there. I don't have to worry about it. When I come home today or tomorrow or next week, it's still there. I've outsourced it. It's external to me. Okay, so here's the question. How are you capturing information? This week would be a great time to take an inventory of how you capture information. Some of you may do that routinely in a digital way. Others of you may write it down, and that's fine too. If that works for you, great. But a good thing this week is for us to take an inventory on how we capture things and think about what that workflow looks like. If you don't have a specific method or way to capture, explore some options. I'd love to help you with that if you want some help with that. If you do have one, really lean into that. If it's new to you, learn as much as you can about it and work the features and lean into that and really make that your MO of how you capture things. Now, once you've captured something, again, you kind of get it in there, it's in there, and you know it's safe where it needs to be for the moment. We then move into the O, and that is organize that information. We've got it captured. Now, how do we organize that in a way that gets it into its final resting place, final save place, but also is accessible to us, and we can start to connect it with other pieces of information that come into our life. I want you to think of capturing and organization two separate things, and here's why. Because when we capture something, that's a bad time to organize it because we're just getting it into our mind. And we don't really probably have the bandwidth. Most of you may not have the time to think, okay, where am I going to put that quote? And organize it in a folder, and where am I going to put that in my second brain? That's a lot of work to do in the moment. So let your capture thing just be there. Later on, perhaps in the day or the week or the month, you can go back, revisit that, and you can then figure out when you have more time to reflect, where can I organize this? Think of it as two separate things. Probably the most important reason why it's important to keep it separate is because if you try to organize it right when you capture it, there's a friction there. And the whole idea of PKM is to make it as frictionless as possible. We want to just move from one thing to the next. It increases our efficiency. It increases our productivity. Now, when do you then organize it? Again, this is not magic. I'm just telling you what I do. I have a slot in my Google Calendar every night at 6:30. Now, I'm not like legalistic about that. Sometimes it's 7, 8, 9, whatever. But it's in my calendar at 6:30, and it's simply called daily review. And so at 6:30, I have a half hour slotted where I sit down and I intentionally review all the stuff I've captured that day. And I figure out, okay, where am I going to, if I need to, where am I going to organize this and save it? We'll talk about that in a minute. So it's just intentionally setting out time to process through what you've captured. Let me give you one more example. I'm going to open up my desktop here and show you. Let's say you're getting up in the morning and you're like me, you read the news and you see something that catches your eye and you want to save it. This is what I do every morning. I go to this tab up here that says daily, and I click it and it opens up just a whole bunch of tabs that I just kind of quickly go through as a part of my morning routine. One of those tabs is Google News right here. And it has just, as you know, you've been here before, lots of different news sites, okay? And what I do after I've had my coffee and my breakfast and I had some quiet time, I then turn to this and I then begin to work through just a brief scan of the headlines. Now, I'm not reading these articles. All I'm doing is looking for something that's interesting to me. There could be a lot of stuff that catches my attention, but what really is interesting to me? Let's say, just for kicks, let's say I'm scanning down and I see, let's see, BBC is independent, NPR. Let's say I want to read this NPR article. Another app that I use to help this capture process is, and I'm kind of doubling back to the capture deal, is an app, and it's, again, lots of different ways to do this. There's Pocket, that's another app to use. There's Read It Later apps. This is what I use. I'll click on the article, and up here on this orange plus is an app called My Mind, M-I-M-I-N-D. And My Mind is just a simple way to click on it. And when you click on it, it'll save it. You'll see 1 moment saving. It's saving it to its own site called My Mind. And basically, once I save it, I go and close out that tab. I don't read anymore. I don't think about it anymore. I just put it into my mind. The beautiful thing about My Mind is then later on, I can go back into My Mind when I have more time and when I start to organize things. And I can open up that article. Here's a little screenshot. It, by AI, gives it, it gives it its own tags. AI gives it its own tags. You don't even have to remember the name of the article. You could put in NPR. You could put in any of these tags that may be a part of that. And when you do that, it's going to pull that up. You can search for all the stuff you put in last week, put that in the search box, all the stuff you added last week. It'll bring all the stuff from last week. It's just a good way to, in a seemingly unorganized way, because there's no folders or anything in this, but bring that back up. And the idea, though, is that it's just a spot where it lands until you can then deal with it and organize it. As you do that, it's going to help you process it. Later on in the day, then I'll go into My Mind. I'll then go into the Google Keep things that I've shared or that I've captured, and I'll then start to organize and put into certain folders what I found. Some of it I just discard because I find out it's not as interesting as I thought it was. Other things I really want to save it. So how do I organize it? Again, back to Tiago Forte, he suggests what's called a PARA method. Again, some of you may know about this, others you may not. PARA simply stands for P-A-R-A, projects, areas, resources, and archive. And the idea behind the PARA method is that any piece of information that comes into us that we can capture, we can then organize in just 4 categories. Is it a project? I'll talk about that in a second. Is it an area? Is it a resource, or is it archive? Projects are defined this way. It's anything for which we're responsible that has a specific deadline coming up. It's more short-term stuff. Not everything's a project, but it may be a work project. It may be a home project. Something that you're responsible for. The buck stops with you, but you're going to be called upon a deadline before too long. That's a project. Second, it's the most actionable, by the way. It's the most necessary to act on. Second category is areas. These are any areas of our life that are less actionable, but we still are responsible for them, but they don't have deadlines that are just immediate. For example, in my areas, I have finances. Now I have bills that are due every month, as you do, but it varies. So I'm responsible for those, but it's not a project necessarily. It's an area of my life. I have writing is one of my areas. I enjoy writing. I don't have deadlines necessarily. If I wrote a book, maybe I'd move that up into projects, but it's something that I'm responsible for. I want to keep doing. And so I put that in areas. The third category is resources. These are probably what you think. Articles you run across. You maybe highlight those articles, the parts of it you want to keep and capture. Book notes. I have a category called book notes. When I read a book, I take notes on that book, and I then want to find a place to store that. And so I have a folder underneath areas called book notes. And so I can click on any book that I've read. You'll see a page, and I can see all the highlights that are attached to that particular book note page. And then the last category is archive. And this is obviously anything that doesn't fit in those three categories. It's expired, it's done with, the project's over. You don't delete it. You may at some point use it later on, but you just dump it in the archive folder, knowing that it's external, it's saved, it's safe, and you can use it and access it anytime, but it's not being used on a regular basis. Let's go back to that quote about Kent that I was using as an example before, okay? So we're gonna go to keep, and we've already captured it. We're gonna go to the quote itself. This is my Google Keep on my desktop. This is what I do. Here's my workflow. I'll go down to copy to Google Docs, okay?
We can't see it.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, let me open up. Thank you, Kent.
Sure.
Sorry, I forgot to share that part of my screen. Okay, I think that should be good. Going back up to Keep, here is the Google Keep quote that I saved and captured. I went to copy to Google Docs just a second ago. This is where it ended. Open Doc. It's opening a separate Google Doc that now has that quote in there. This is a separate note I want to save in my Google Drive, which is my second brain. It's where I externally store all my information. It's now saved here. I can go up and I can go File. I want to move this now into the location of where I'm organizing. I'm going to go to all locations. I'm going to open up my drive. Here are my four categories: projects, areas, resources, archive. This is temporarily there because it by default puts it under my drive. I don't want to keep it there. I want to put it with all my other quotes. I'm going to go to resources. You'll see quotes. I'm going to open that up. And here's a bunch of quotes that I've already added. I'm going to hit move. And now this is in my quotes file. And that may seem like a few steps to get to, but the real power and the magic is going to come when we go to the next step. But it takes the organizing to get there in the first place. Just for kicks, I'll show you areas, just for what this is worth. These are some of mine. I haven't got them all put in there yet. Finances, food, things like cooking, recipes, that kind of thing. My health, medical reports, blood pressure checks. My home, things like my automobile, the rental home that we have here, tech that's in my home. Ministry, this is speaking out stuff for me, all my sermons, that kind of thing. PKM, running, this is races I've run, whatever, and the results of that. My voiceover stuff, and writing. There's other stuff I'm going to add, but it'll just give you an idea of the areas. Resources, I'll quickly show you that real quick. Articles, obviously what they are, highlights from certain articles I've read I want to keep. Book notes, pics and videos. These are not Google pics, photos. Those are separate, but things that are important, like foundational pics and videos for my family or for me. Quotes, scripture sparks. Sparks are just concepts that come and pop in your brain you want to save and memorialize, capture. Things about the scripture I'll put in there. Things about sermon notes if I'm taking notes in a church service, and just general sparked ideas I'll put in there. So that just, again, gives you an idea of kind of the flow of how to get from capture back to organize. And so you've taken it from from capturing, organizing, and then here's that magic part, and that's the distilling. Distilling is when you've done all those things we just talked about, the reflecting on what you've captured and organized, and how it then begins to connect to other things, other notes, other ideas that you've captured and stored. This is when you really start to see the connections of various parts of your life. And I know that sounds like an overstatement, but it really does work. In the creation of this time together tonight, I began to pull different notes that I had saved into what we're talking about. And in my Google Drive, I simply put they call it a smart chip in Google land, but it's a way to connect one note to the next. Other ecosystems use tags, and it just connects those two together. So I can open up one note and instantly see other notes that it's connected to. Now that really comes in handy a year down the road when maybe I'm reviewing something and I think, oh yeah, I forgot. There's that quote about Kent and I forgot all about that. And I can see where that's connected to other things. That's the distilling process. It takes thinking, it takes reflection. But again, if we'll lean into that, I think it's going to make us better at what we do. If you're a writer, I think it's going to make you a better writer. If you're, I know there's a pastor on the call tonight. I think it's make you a better pastor. There's a couple of radio professionals on the call tonight. It's going to make us better in our radio jobs. We begin to see these connections, and we know they're in a place where we can easily access them. There's not a jillion folders. We know it fits in one of those four, and we can quickly and efficiently get to that information. Okay, what we're doing is we're shifting our thinking to organizing by the outcomes that they can help us realize, if that makes sense. We're organizing, we're storing, not just to have a place, but we're organizing so that we can pursue some outcomes that information is going to help us get to. Here's the application of distilling. This week, take an inventory of where your stored information, where it lives, but then also what your organizational workflow is. Like what apps or sites are you using? If you're analog, how does that look? Where are you storing that information? If you don't have a specific platform or storage, explore some options. Again, I'd love to help you think about that. And if you have one, look at it and utilize that. Now, again, there's no perfect platform. A platform doesn't make any of this magically happen. It's the process. It's the way we do it with the platform that really yields some dividends. All right. So we've distilled the information. We've reflected on that. And then the last category, and I'll quickly move on, we'll go to some questions here in a few moments, is to express the information. We've gone from something real granular like capturing to then equally granular storing that, going from that to distilling that. And what we're doing is we're actually starting to funnel out because we're starting to use what's relevant to us and interesting to us in ways that can hopefully help not only us, but other people. Now, spoiler alert, our time together tonight, this may be obvious, is my expressing what I'm learning and have captured, organized, and distilled about PKM. So again, I want to just stop long to say thank you for allowing me the privilege of sharing and expressing what it is that's interesting to me. Obviously, you being here tonight, there's some interest on your part, and I'm grateful for that. Regardless of who is talking about this, if we can utilize a system like this, it can begin to help not only ourselves, but be a great help to others. I know for a fact, and again, I'm not just picking on Kent because he's my longtime friend, but I know Kent, and I'll say this to your face because I'm seeing you now. Kent, if you don't follow Kent on Instagram, this is a free plug, Kent. You need to follow Kent on Instagram. And here's why I say that. Kent is someone who studies productivity. I know that for a fact because he consistently on a daily basis helps me think about productivity through his Instagram. Now, there's a lot of things other than that he posts, and they're all good, but there's a lot of productivity stuff. And I'm guessing, I'm not putting him on the spot, but I'm guessing he has some kind of system to do that. He's not just spitballing it every day, but there's some way that he's doing that. And so what intrigues Kent Curry, because he's working this system, and what intrigues me, because I'm trying to work this system, we can begin to see some really positive ripple effect. This is going to sound a little bit like an overstatement, but I really do believe it. How is it that we make the world a better place? We capture stuff. We efficiently organize that stuff. We think about it and distill it, and then we express it. Now, I'm not being Pollyannish. I really just think it happens. I think we really can be a help to people and really kind of spur thinking and be a resource for people. And that's a beautiful thing. So last application on this one, the application, take an inventory this week on how you can share your learning, whatever that is. What are you learning about? What would be in your areas folder? That would be something you're just interested about. You want to learn more about it. And then how could you share that as you distill it, as you think about it, as you know it's somewhere good and safe and you can access it easily? How could you share that? Again, there's a lot of different ways we could do that, but maybe it'd be good to take an inventory on that. Okay. All right. I've been talking for several minutes now. I'm going to stop and I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask questions. Maybe it's on what we've covered. Maybe something else spurred your thinking. Even better yet, maybe something has worked for you, whether it's the same or different in the way I do it that you could share. Let's kind of dialogue a little bit about that. So I'm gonna page over here. I don't know that anyone has jotted down a question, which is fine, but someone be brave and start and just ask a question, make a comment. Let's kind of just talk for a few moments. We won't belabor the point, but let's give an opportunity for that.
Todd, quick question. So you already mentioned that you have a daily review. David Allen in Getting Things Done talks about a weekly review.
Mm-hmm.
How does that discipline work for you? Do you literally do it every night or do you do a culmination at the end of the week? Just talk to us about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So at this point, Andrew, I'm doing it daily. I have read many things of people who do a weekly review and a monthly review. I'll tell you where that kind of is in my thinking. And full disclosure, I've not yet got that nailed down in terms of the longer term review. That is on my agenda to do because I want to develop that. I see great benefit in that. But I'll tell you one area that I have toyed a little bit on that is the capture method that I showed you a moment ago that's called My Mind, the AI assisted capture method. I frequently, on a weekly basis, will go in and put in the search term last week and then hit enter, and it will pull up everything that I've captured from last week. And all the new stuff is kind of wherever it is, but then the last week stuff. And so then I can then review and remind myself of what was interesting to me and what I captured last week. Now, not everything in my mind do I distill and organize and the week goes by and it's done. So this is a good way for me personally to be reminding myself. There's a feature even in the app that's called serendipity, and you click on that and it'll just randomly give you what you've saved over the time of your mind life. And you can click keep or forget. And you can remember, I've done forget on several things, like they're not interesting to me anymore. They're not relevant to me anymore. I won't use it. So I just forget it and go on. So that's kind of an incomplete answer to you, but it's in process for me. But it's certainly great value. Yeah. But right now it's a daily thing for me.
Hey, Todd, it's Abraham.
Hey, Abraham.
Hey, thanks so much for doing this tonight. I desperately need this. I do all my reading exclusively on the Amazon ecosystem on a Kindle.
Mm-hmm.
Are you aware of a way that it will capture somehow automatically your highlights or your notes that you make in Kindle books that would then save me from having to retype or handwrite or something?
Yeah, that's a great question. There is an app that I would highly recommend. I don't use this because I typically don't use Kindle, but everything I've heard of this app is off the charts. People are excited about it. Now, full disclosure, there is a trial period, but then if you want to keep it, which I think if it's valuable enough to you, you might be interested. It's called Readwise. It's all one word, Readwise, together, Readwise. And Readwise is an app that you sign up for. And as you highlight in Kindle, it automatically exports what you're highlighting into whatever your storage of choice is. For me, it would be into a Google Doc. Other people use a program called Notion. That's a big thing for a lot of people. Dropbox, whatever your storage is. and it will, behind the scenes, you don't do anything else. You just highlight it. It will export in there. And then you have it in it. It kind of is going past the capture mode. You're just capturing it with your highlight is all you're doing. And so it does it for you. I do a lot of reading on my tablet using library ebooks. And I have a workflow. It's in that document in the chat box if you want to look at it, that I will highlight using Libby. If you're familiar with Libby, it's a way to read library ebooks. I'll highlight in there. I will then use the export feature in Libby to get what essentially is an HTML. And then I have a copyable quote that's in that ledger that I've highlighted. I can then put that into Google Docs. So yeah. That answer your question, hopefully? Yeah, that's a good question though.
Yeah, very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Todd.
Yeah.
It's Tracy. Thank you
Tracy.
very much. I desperately need this too.
Yeah.
So I read a lot of books, and I read them all like actual physical books in my hand. Does anybody else do that? And I don't really have a good system for getting the notes out of the books. What I've been doing is journaling, but then I can't find where I put it in my journal. Sometimes I take screenshots of pages that I've highlighted. Do you have any recommendations for how to get your notes out of actual hardcover books?
Yeah, and I'm assuming you want to get them into a digital form. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah.
Rather than just a picture of the highlight.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
So that I can pull it into something else. Yes.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I face the same issue when I read a hardcover book, which there's nothing like reading a actual paper book. I love it.
Amen.
When I read that, what I will often do, and again, this is the nerdy part of me coming out, but I'm a Google guy, so I will open up Google Lens, which is just another app. You may be familiar with that. And I will take a picture of whatever it is I want to highlight, that page. And then Google Lens by default will highlight most of the text in the page that you've just captured, but then it'll give you handles to pull in and just focus on just a paragraph if you want. And when you do that, you just hit copy text, and then you have it in your clipboard, and you can put it wherever you want to put it. You can put it in Google Docs, you can put it in wherever your storage of choice is. So I utilize Google Lens for that. I know people who they are sold on actually typing in, they highlight it perhaps or underline it in their book, and they're sold on typing it. I have one guy, Greg Wheeler, a guy I follow, he types in his notes into his storage because he feels like that's a more distilling way for him to interact with what he's highlighted. And that's the legitimate point. It takes a little bit longer. It's not quite as techo, but he's internalizing it more in his case. So yeah, that's kind of what comes to my mind. And you know, I've taken pictures of pages and never really transcribed them either. That's rare, but if it's really important, I've got notes in my storage that they're just sitting there. And that's the cool thing, is they can sit there and they're not going anywhere. And I can, in the note in my Google Docs, I can put whatever it's about, I can type that in so I can search for it later on, and there it is. And if I want to transcribe it later, great. If I don't, that's okay. So yeah, that's what I would say to that.
Great.
Kent, yeah.
I've got an iPhone, so the newer operating systems allow you basically to do the text, like you said, with Lens without the app.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm a fastidious, lots of pictures, my photos fill up, and then I compile that into a doc or something. So I don't know what type of phone Tracy has, but
yeah,
I'd say those are the two big ones.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Thank you.
Can I show you one thing, Tracy, while we're out here? Again, I want to just open this up real quick. This is going to take you to a book notes folder. You might have seen that when we were exploring the organized section. I'm going to open up here it is. Yeah, this is under resources, number 3 under resources. This is book notes. These are not all the books I've read, obviously, but there are a few that I've read recently. And this one right here, The Great Air Race, I just finished that not too long ago. And so this is the way I have my book notes organized. It was an ebook, so I was reading it on Libby. And on Libby, I had a couple of quotes from it. It's an historical look at the advent of U.S. aviation following World War I and how they got the U.S. airmail up and going. The race is a transcontinental race and back, and just an amazing book. I highly recommend it. Just a fun read. But there were two quotes that jumped out at me, and I highlighted them in my Libby. And then when I exported from Libby into my Google Docs, I found I have these two quotes. The one I want to focus on is this one: extraordinary and routine. I put a mark there because this page here. I do every book I've read. I have the same looking page: the title, the author, an image of the book so I can remember what it looks like, and then notes and quotes. I don't put the whole quote here on this book notes title page. I want to just put tags. And the reason I do that is because in a second, when I click on that extraordinary and routine, it's going to take me to a separate note called extraordinary and routine. The reason I do that is because there may be other notes in my lifetime that I may want to connect with that and put tags on those notes going back to that one note called extraordinary and routine. But it obviously is a note from this book. That's why I have it here. So I'm going to open that up. This is the note. It's a simple note. Here's the quote that I wanted to remember. The extraordinary was fast becoming the routine, chapter 31. And you'll see I've already tagged or actually put in another link to a different, unrelated, not a book note, just a quote that I ran across that I'll share here in a few moments. But you'll see that I linked those two because they seem to be well linking in my estimation. Okay, so I wanted to just share that for the sake of showing you kind of how to take it from one form into the other, connect those two, and that's in that distilling process. It's connecting these things, and it really begins to broaden what we've stored in a really efficient way, in a positive way. Okay. Thank you, Tracy. Any other questions? Thank you for asking. These are great.
Hey, Todd.
Oh, go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Hey,
Yeah.
and first of all, thank you, Bud, for putting this on. This has been really helpful. I've started recently with Evernote, and it's pretty similar. I do have trouble though organizing projects, step by step, as far as keeping you on task. What's your next step in a certain project? What do you find helpful for that? So you have all this information, you've captured it. So when you're organizing it and you're pulling it all together for a purpose,
Yeah.
What system do you use for that?
Yeah. So again, forgive me for keep opening up this, but I just give you a real life example here that maybe can help your thinking on this. I'm going to share the screen once again. So Rick, I have a part of my Google Drive that has the 4 folders, and my projects at this point, I've got other projects that I've not yet put in here, but right now my main job is my how should I say it? It's the main way or the main project load that I have. Okay, so I have lots of projects in my radio job, and so Bright FM is essentially my project ecosystem here. But if there's something else in my drive that I want to focus on as a project, what I do is I'll identify and star it, and you'll see what I've done here. I'm working on a project right now in my voiceover business that is a Bible quizzing, recording, voiceover kind of project. It's due soon. I've been working on it, and by starring it, even though it lives, the voiceover Voice One Productions folder is underneath areas because it's an ongoing responsibility for me. This is a project that I'm doing. It has a deadline. So what I do is I star that. And so now when I see this star and I open up that star folder, I'm seeing elements of different folders that are all combined in one place. So it's cross folder. It's not just one folder. It's not just radio. It's Voice One Productions. It's PKM. There are other, it's just all kinds of stuff that I do that. Now, I will say this again, and just in full disclosure, this is an area, projects specifically, is an area that I'm still working through my workflow on. And one thing about PKM that I've read a lot about is that folders definitely can be movable. You may move one element of a folder that's normally in areas, you may move that into projects because it's needed in that project that you're working on. So maybe that's the simplest way I could suggest is whatever you need, move it into there. And then when you're done with that project, you don't not necessarily put it in archive, but you may move it back to where that ever lives, wherever else that lives typically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you, Todd.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
How do you measure success? How do you know this is working versus, just to be facetious, you're just wasting a half hour of your life every night at 6:30 going through everything. How do you know it's working? How do you give us some ideas here?
Okay.
Or some feedback.
Yeah, so I will give you feedback. And I actually jotted down, I'm glad you asked that question. I jotted down 3 things that have been results for me personally since I've done this and since I've been doing this. Less stress. Now, that sounds odd, but I can't tell you how much this has helped me be less stressed about stuff. Knowing that if something comes in, I have a method to capture it and then eventually organize it and think about it, makes me be at ease during the day. I don't have to worry about forgetting something because my second brain is good. That's what it's there for. I know that sounds odd to say it that way, but it really is true for me. So less stress. Now there's still stress in life, but in terms of my digital life and my processing of information, I feel less overwhelmed by information. I feel less exhausted by information because the system itself takes the stress away. And also it's helped me to be more fastidious about ignoring what really is not going to hold a lot of value to me. I'll be very honest with you, Kent, social media, the importance of how much I check that has gone down for me when I've implemented this because I'm beginning to see its usefulness is very limited. Now there's some usefulness, but overall it's limited for me. And so it's not as much a priority as it was before. So less stress. Related to that, and again, these are kind of emotional things here, but more peace. I don't know how else to say this. When I go to bed at night, I know what the day has consisted of. I know what I've allowed in my mind, and I know what was important, what wasn't important, and I have a way to process that. And so I'm at peace about that. And I don't worry about that at nearly as much. And then doing this, this is, I mentioned in my last Facebook invite, I feel like in a lot of ways, I'm just jumping in the deep end on this because I've not been at this all my life, but I'm convinced of it. I think there's great value in it. And to be able to share that with people like yourself, that excites me. It really does. And there are 2 reasons I exist personally. I exist, number 1, to teach people, and number 2, to encourage people. And so that was formed before any of PKM entered my life. And so I'm seeing how something like this allows me to be able to do both. And that's satisfying. Yeah, that's very satisfying. So I can understand maybe for some, they look at that and think, yeah, that's 30 minutes. You could be doing something else. I don't know that I could do something more important though. I could find something to do, but for me, it's adding value to my life. Yeah. So, yeah.
I'm going to ask if you don't mind, a kind of a more executive level, business level decision.
Who is this?
Question. This is
okay.
Robert Rabb.
Yeah, I got you, Robert.
So,
thank you. Yep.
What is the value of this in the corporate world as far as helping CEOs, executives, entrepreneurs manage their life, their data, their email tidbits that come through that can be kind of sifted into a different format? Just curious, from the business side, where is this going?
Yeah.
Consultants such as yourself, if you were consulting,
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking of bivocational ministers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking of pastors who are very good in the boardroom, but if they could have something like this to speak to CEO level. Just
Yeah.
just thought I'd throw that out there on the more
That's a great question.
commercial side.
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful question. I think, although I'm not in a position like that, I can see there being great application, and maybe Andrew could speak more to this because he's in management of a great company. Great application for someone who is leading, a CEO, for example, someone who's involved in management in a company, of really slowly but surely organizing around this system the essence of how they operate in terms of digitally, and not just digitally, but prioritizing in this way. Tiago Forte, he is CEO of Forte Labs. I'll put this in your email summary. And he actually has a whole section in Building a Second Brain, and then a whole YouTube collection of videos of how he implements this, Robert, in the leading of Forte Labs. And he spells it out. He goes into great detail. He peels the curtain back and he says, this is the way that we do things. Here's the file folders I have underneath my 4 categories. Here's the subfolders I have. And he just lets it all be there for people to look at. So I would probably lean toward him. And again, I can forward on in the email summary kind of a little bit more about that business angle and the corporate angle. But he literally operates his entire Forte Labs company, which is a multi-million-dollar company, based on productivity on these principles. And so, yeah, I think there definitely is
The average CEO is old, as you can see, you know, by the research, and they're mostly male, and they're already entrenched in their space of expertise.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they're behind the 8 ball in this area. So I don't know, just was thinking about it.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. That's a great point. One of the cool things too is that as we start to implement this kind of stuff, one of the things Tiago says a lot is there's a lot to distill just in this thinking, right? There's a lot of this to talk about, and so much that we're not going to even talk about on this call. And so we don't want to inadvertently allow, and I was guilty of this at the start, allow the enormity of this new system to keep me from starting. And so one of the things he mentioned is just start with one folder, just one folder, and don't try to organize all of your past files that whatever system you use that wasn't organized. Don't go to your bookmark file on Explorer or Chrome and try to organize all that. Just start today, and moving forward, he calls it the need-based approach. Whatever you need moving forward, put all that other stuff in kind of an archive folder, just leave it there, but moving forward, start to implement this. So maybe that's a kind of a roundabout way of saying, if you're, older and you're working with someone who's older and they're not working through this or probably won't work through it, maybe you can just start today, moving forward, and be in it for that long haul. And it's amazing how when we start today, how that starts to build on it. And personally, when I started this, I was concerned about all my old files. Like, I need to get them organized because I'm a type A, right? But there's something very freeing about just relegate those to the archive. They're there if I need them, but start today on this system moving forward. So there's a lot in that question, but thank you for that. And I'll include some information in that summary that maybe will help with that, Rob. Yeah.
And I forgot to say thank you for hosting, Todd.
No problem. No problem. Thank you. Anybody else? These are great questions.
One more question, Todd. I echo everybody else. Thanks for doing this. It's super.
Sure.
It's fun, actually.
Yeah.
The Nerd Fest is real.
Yes.
So in the book, or what are your thoughts on, we have this whole beast that we have to contend with, and it's called an inbox.
Yeah.
So do you personally integrate that into this system as well by extracting data points and using the same process? Is that how you do it, or do you have your inbox sort of set up with the same filing system? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So I'm going to be real upfront with you, Andrew. I have not conquered my inbox. I just haven't. I feel really good about my second brain Google Drive folders. My inbox needs work for sure, but I have, and you hinted at this, I have a framework for eventually doing that. There are other implementations that probably I will lean into as well. There's all kinds of, again, you all probably know more about this than I do in terms of the inbox zero and all kinds of different ways you can look at things, and even some automated things to help you. I kind of think, although I can't give you chapter and verse on this, but I kind of think probably people like Forte and others would probably say there may come a point when you have to just start at zero, push some stuff into an archive folder and start at zero, implementing these system things. And what that does is studies show that people are more productive if their desk is clear, right? Because they're not encumbered with stuff, right? So I may have to do that to be, again, full disclosure, I may have to do that is just start as if it's day one, put everything else in the archive. I know I can access it and I will need to because there's stuff in there. But what this does is it keeps me from emailing myself important stuff. I've done that before. It keeps me from leaving tabs open because I think maybe I'm going to need to use this later on. It's just stuff like that. And certainly email would be in that category too. And pulling out stuff in that email. Yeah, so I think there's ways to do that for sure. I'm not a good example of that yet. So I'll leave it at that for that email.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good thing you can't see my Google tabs presently. You probably have a stroke.
No problem. There's no shame at all. Believe me. Believe me. Yeah. Anything else? Well, let's go ahead and wrap up. I'm gonna, after we kind of stop the recording, I'll hang out for just a few minutes. We're not necessarily in terms of recording have to get off right at the hour. I will stop the recording, but I'll hang out. I'll stay on as long as you want. But I do want to end by making an offer to you. As I said over and over again, I'm not working for anybody. I'm not shilling for anybody. I just love what I'm learning. And so when I say offer, please understand that's just from Todd. Here's the offer. I want to be as much of an ongoing support for you in this area if I can be, and if you're interested. And sometimes it's helpful to have someone just a dialogue about this. How you do it in terms of methodology may be different than the way I do it, but the framework we can talk about, even if that's us getting together one-on-one on the screen and just talking about where you're at, where you want to go. And I'll share some more ideas about that. I want to help in any way I can. So to let that be ended offer, I'll mention it again in that email summary I'll send you. And you'll never be a bother reaching out to me. Because again, as you can kind of tell, I get a little geeked about this. And so I will look forward to that if that's something you would be interested in. And just kind of help you in the step forward on that. It'll help me live out some of my 2 principles of life too. So that would be cool too. I will send you after this the email summary, which will just kind of summarize what we've talked about. And then I'll also include some links that are in the chat box, but also some other ones. And Robert, ones you talked about. And if there are questions about those, let me know. And then just, if you would, just keep in touch. I'd love to hear how it's going for you. I hope you, and I think you will, experience peace and less stress. And just be better for it, especially as you start to share with other people. So that's really cool.